So, welcome to the next edition of the Rare Business Podcast. Today with me I have Doug Richard. Hi, Doug.
Hello.
So, Doug, for the benefit of our readers and listeners, tell us a bit about you and about your career and the work that you're currently doing.
All right, I'll give you the very quick version.
Splendid.
I'm obviously not British, as you can tell by the sound of my voice. I'm a Californian from LA. I spent most of my early adult years starting software companies in LA, focusing on film, TV, special effects, that sort of thing. I sold my last business in the U.S. in about 2001, and we moved over to the U.K. My wife and I decided that our children should have a chance to see a bit of the rest of the world.
Right.
I then started an angel group with a friend up in Cambridge, and then started another company, a research company. And a couple of years in, I was contacted by the BBC, who asked me if I wanted to appear on this new TV show no one had ever heard of called Dragon's Den.
Yes.
And I said yes, and that definitely changed my profile in this country.
Indeed.
In a non-trivial way. I was on for 2 seasons. I then stepped off the show. Apparently, I'm the only dragon who's ever quit, but what can I say? Because I wanted to go on and run a very large investment fund, and one could not do both at the same time.
Sure.
I did that for a number of years, invested about $200 million US into early high-stage tech, started another software company, and when the downturn came, I decided that it wasn't a good time to make money, but it might be a good time to help. So I started a social enterprise called School for Startups.
Excellent.
And it has taken over my life.
So you've turned into an educator.
I have turned into an well, I'm also advised government a lot. I've written 2 reviews for the government, one on small business, and then this last year I wrote one on to help redesign the apprenticeship system. So between that and School for Startups, I'm pretty much full up.
Fantastic. So now you're just about to publish a book called How to Start a Creative Business, the Jargon-Free Guide for Creative Entrepreneurs. Can you tell us a bit about that and why you think it's sort of needed? Because I have a bit of a soft spot for creative entrepreneurs. My family's a little bit creative. My brother's a musician. I pull my hair out sometimes about some of the business decisions that he does or doesn't make, etc., etc. So tell us a little bit about that, because I think it's going to be quite close to my heart.
Okay, so School for Startups obviously has now grown to be quite a large organization. We have programs in many countries. But one of our flagship programs, and the one that's closest to my heart, is the School for Creative Startups, which is our biggest program in London.
Uh-huh.
And that's a program that focuses on people who are at heart creative. And what I mean by that is not just some mystical use of the term. I mean somebody who is a musician, an artist, a fine artist, a textile designer, a fashion designer, an accessories designer, somebody in the food arts. I mean somebody who is at heart involved in a creative activity.
Yeah.
Businesses largely are founded either around an innovation or around a creative start. Mm-hmm. If you think about a business, somebody comes up with a better way to do dry cleaning, somebody comes up with a faster way to deliver food, somebody comes up with a new chip. These are innovation-driven businesses. They are advantage-driven.
Yeah.
There's another type of business, though, and that's a creative-centric business. It's where somebody says, I'm not better, says, I'm different, I'm new. This is a creative inspiration. Very little time and effort has been spent on helping people start creative businesses, even though they tend to be very successful, and even more to the point, in our country, in the UK, the creative sectors are one of the most important sectors. It's one of the biggest exports of this country.
Indeed.
I have met now many creative entrepreneurs because I've been running the School for Creative Startups now for 2 years. We've helped launch over 170 businesses.
Wow.
And it became crystal clear to me that nobody had really tried to shape a way of teaching to people who are at heart creative. And so I decided to write a book for them. Mm-hmm. And that's what this book is.
Fantastic. And we were talking before, I think what I really like about it is how it's quite colourful, and it's with the way it's illustrated and things, and it really draws you in. So it's not that a book which has like 300 pages worth of black and white text, but actually it speaks to it. I think it would probably speak to quite a lot of creative people just because of the way it's laid out.
Well, it's interesting because publishers are very conscious of cost these days.
Yes.
And had this book been published in a word-only format, it would have been probably about half as long. And so we had to really fight our corner to make the point, no, this book is really explicit in that it's an artistically driven piece of work. So one of the best illustrators I know in the world worked with me, Aaron Rommel, to try to create a creative center of gravity. It's intended to be, just as you say, a graphically driven, visually driven book. And if you think about it, it's not a bad idea. I mean, if you look at the people on my course, many of them are, in the nicest possible way, completely dyslexic. And
Yes.
giving them visual tools to explain numerical or otherwise abstracted concepts, these are just different ways of learning.
Yes.
And I am not precious. I think that the best thing one can do is reach out to the person in the way they want to learn.
Well, absolutely, and it's all founded on how we learn. I mean, where we can be both, both very kind of logical, analytical, numbers sort of, and facts driven, or we can be very visual, and that it's all about how we experience different things and always how we see different things.
Oh, absolutely. You
So,
know, I'm sorry, go ahead.
so what I was going to say was, with your experience of working with creative businesses and helping them and creative entrepreneurs and helping them launch, and also the writing of the book, I mean, what do you think are the main lessons for creative businesses that they sort of don't do, but they should be doing kind of more of, as it were?
Well, I think that what I've done in this book is I've taken the core principles I apply to the starting of any book, of any business,
Uh huh.
and apply them to a creative business. And I have a very strong method for starting businesses. It centers on 10 key questions that somebody needs to ask and learn how to answer about their business idea or their hoped for business
Yes.
before they start the business, or if they've already started the business whilst it's quite young.
Right.
And the reasoning here is that businesses, like anything else, can be designed.
Yes.
They can be put into a shape like building a clock so that they work well or work poorly. And most people don't realize it. They don't realize that there's a process, a method, a recipe, that this doesn't have to be accidental. It's not merely a case of following your passion. Actually, just like any great craft, it's something you can learn how to do and do well. And so what I'm trying to impart is that this is not only doable, it's not that difficult. It's just something that nobody has laid out for them quite explicitly before.
Right. Okay. For many people, for many creative business people and creative entrepreneurs, I mean, I'll take my again. I'm going to beat down on my brother a little bit.
Okay.
Not in a harsh way, but it's like if I talk to my brother about numbers and markets and distribution and that type of thing, he starts to glaze over.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And they do with me as well. And a lot of the time we've spent at the School for Creative Startups is learning ways to bring these things to life.
Right.
And to try, and the book is very story-driven. So rather than being lesson-driven, we tell stories, a lot of stories. And many of them are quite successful, stories of quite successful creative entrepreneurs across the entrepreneurial landscape. And so I've teased out many people who very much were artists or creative people at heart, and who have nevertheless gone on to run really wonderful, successful businesses that preserve the creative heart of the business, don't force them to make compromises to what they want to accomplish, and yet give them that freedom that a business permits. And by being story-led rather than lesson-led, I think it helps keep people more engaged.
Yeah, and it sort of knits it all together as well, a bit better. And
yeah, well, it's a narrative-driven rather than sort of lesson plan-driven book, isn't it?
Absolutely. So, Doug, what would you say if you were? I mean, for my readers and my listeners, and they know a creative entrepreneur, they are a creative entrepreneur themselves, and they're thinking, I've got this idea, or I'm developing this idea, or I've launched this idea, but I want to push on with it. What would you say, out of your experience, would be your top tips for them? What are the top 3 things that you think they should be doing that they may not be currently doing?
You mean in addition to buying my book?
Well, apart from that, yes, obviously.
Okay, just checking. Well, because largely my book and my method, my book is merely the laying down of the very answers to the question you asked.
Yeah.
I believe that the core thing that anyone should do before starting a business is to ask a series of clear, quite simple, straightforward questions that then require going out into the world to get the answers.
Yeah.
And it's that exploration of the business idea in the world with other people that really makes it likely that that business will succeed.
Right.
That's what makes businesses succeed, is getting out into the world and testing your idea in a very clear, simple, methodical way. And the nice thing about creative people is they bring with them everything they need. They've got their creative center. They know what they want to do. They've got the passion to describe it or show it to other people, and which makes it much easier, not harder.
Yes.
And people like talking about creative activity. It is much easier for a creative person to engage in this kind of effort than somebody who's doing something more innovation-driven or competitively driven.
I think that's fair. I think there's parts of us that there's a part in all of us, I think, that wants to be more creative.
And people respond to that very strongly, I think.
Absolutely. So, Doug, I'm just conscious of time and just want to wrap it up. But there's one final question I always end these conversations on, and that is there anything that you would like to shamelessly plug?
There's two things I would like to shamelessly plug. The first is my book. It's available on Amazon as we speak, both in physical edition and Kindle edition, though I'd be the first to admit, given how graphically oriented it is, it's probably better in a physical edition than a Kindle edition.
I would agree.
Second, I'd like to shamelessly plug to anybody who's reading this that if you are a creative person and you've started a business or think you might want to start a business, you should come to the School for Creative Startups website. And even further, we have a huge event next week, right in the center of London at Somerset House, where all of the young creative startups are going to be having pop-up stores simultaneously, and will be Saturday and Sunday, and it's called the Startup Showcase.
Okay.
And people can come along and see for themselves what we're up to.
Fantastic. Well, that's brilliant. Thank you, Doug, for that. I'll make sure I get that all sort of linked up and give them all big sort of shout out so we can reach out to as many creative businesses and entrepreneurs as we can. And
I appreciate that.
Thank you so much for your time today, and I'll let you know when everything goes live.
All right. I look forward to reading whatever you've written.
Fantastic.
All right. Cheers, man.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.